I'm so glad you're with us here on the Clark Howard Show. You know, our mission is to serve you with knowledge and information that empowers you so you can make better financial decisions in your life. And, you know, we try to answer as many of your questions as we can on the podcast, but there's no way we can even get to more than just a tiny fraction of them. That's where our Team Clark Consumer Action Center comes in. You can learn more at clark.com/CAC how you can get free one-on-one advice and guidance. In this episode, there are lists that I'll talk about a couple times a year of the best insurance companies for auto, the best insurance companies for home, that kind of thing. But recently, I saw an industry database that's for body shops that'll let you know which insurers are on your side and which ones are not after you are in an auto accident and your vehicle has to be repaired. This is important stuff because why do you have this insurance? Well, because you have to. In all states except I think New Hampshire, you don't have to. But you have to have auto insurance to be on the road. And the reason you have it is not to be on the road. It's when something happens that knocks your car off the road. And so I want to talk about that. Also, there's something that I have despised for as long as I can remember. Non-compete clauses, covenants not to compete. Well, they're under attack right now with good reason. I want to tell you what you need to know. So, if I'm a body shop, and I've talked to body shop owners about this, I know when somebody comes in with a wrecked vehicle or they have it towed to my shop, I know from experience which insurers have your back as a consumer and which don't, which are trying to cheap out on the repair to your damaged vehicle, and which ones are not. And so in the body shop industry, there's a database that's put together by something called the Crash Network. And the data is available to the general public. So I'm on their website right now looking at the current list. And what's fascinating is there are so many more auto insurers than we're aware of. Because you think about who we're aware of. We're aware of Geico, Progressive, Allstate, State Farm. Who am I missing? Amica. Amica kind of. But there are certain insurers that have so much of the mind share and market share from all their heavy advertising. And if you're watching TV, particularly sports, well, that's the only time I ever see commercials, so maybe it's elsewhere too. But you're going to see, and even the same commercial block, you might see Progressive and Geico running ads, not next to each other, but in that same block. And you'll see, is it Jake from State Farm and Flo from Progressive and the Gecko from Geico and who am I missing? Allstate's the Mayhem guy. Did I get those right? And so these companies get their market share from marketing. It proves advertising works. But when you look at the list of the 25 best auto insurers from the perspective of a body shop, who's there who is an advocate for the consumer, not one of those bigs make the list. So what's wild is a lot of these companies I've never heard of, you've probably never heard of, but most of these companies that do a really great job are not marketing machines. They are generally local or regional auto insurers, and their ratings are interesting because the body shops give grades from A to F. By the way, the big brand name auto insurers overwhelmingly are down in D and F territory. in terms of how they're there for you as a customer. But I want to hit you with one. Never heard of it. Number one, the only A+, North Carolina Farm Bureau, whoever they are. Number two, with an A, Alpha Mutual. Now, those are the only two insurers in the country for automotive who get an A+ or an A. A- goes to Chubb, if you're familiar with Chubb. Insure wealthy individuals. And then Erie Insurance, which is a regional insurer, gets an A-. And then I'm just going to name these quickly because it take too much time to give an explanation of each. We've got Michigan Farm Bureau, Acuity Insurance, North Star Mutual, Rural Mutual, Mutual of Enumclaw? I guess that's how you say that. Grinnell Mutual, Pure Insurance, another insurer for wealthy people. Amica Mutual, Christa's insurer. Farm Bureau Property Casualty, Pemco Mutual, and then Auto Club AAA Southern California, big auto insurer in California. Pioneer State Mutual, Auto Owners Insurance, AAA Texas, Westfield Insurance, West Bend, Cincinnati Insurance, that has been on best insurer lists for as far back as I can remember. Frankenmuth Insurance, something like that. Selena, Safety Insurance, and in 25th place, Pekin Insurance. So think about it. Of those 25, how many you ever heard of? Like nobody. And so it goes to show how often we as consumers make a decision who we do business with based on the influence of advertising and marketing. But in many cases, to our own detriment. That this involves work to scope out one of these smaller insurers. And you want to see this list for yourself? crashnetwork.com/IRC. And we'll have a link in our notes.
We will indeed.
And you'll be able to see this list. But the idea is don't be passive. Don't just say, oh, well, I really like the Gecko, or Flo is really cool. Her story, by the way, is so fantastic. Wonderful person, too. In real life, I'm not talking about it as Flo. And so this idea of creating personalization of a very impersonal cold product like auto insurance is what these ads are all about with Jake of State Farm and all that stuff. But this is your car, this is your life, and when the chips are down, you want the best service you can get when that's happening. And that's why I want you to know about this list and see if you qualify for any of these, let's call them no-name insurers.
All right, we'll go to questions. Ed in Texas has one about insurance. He says, is there any reason to stay with the same auto or home insurer? It seems that the most insurers play the game of getting new customers by lowballing the first year and then jacking the rates up later. I was with one insurer for 40 years, and then a guy speeding in the parking lot at work T-boned me. They assigned me 40% of the blame and paid me nothing toward my damage. I only had liability on the car. So I switched home and auto insurance companies to another big one. But now I'm reconsidering if I want to pay premiums to be with the highest customer satisfaction insurer. I would save probably $300 a year by hopping insurance companies every year. Would I regret that later?
So the idea of being an insurance hopper, there's real advantage to shopping and maybe switching every 3 years. Shopping as often as every year may lose you any leverage in the marketplace, but the insurer you were with 40 years, I mean, they're laughing behind your back because the auto insurers, several of them use what are called loyalty index scores on you, and the more loyal your personality, the more they know they can pump up rates on you because you're not likely to switch because of brand loyalty. But shopping it every 3 years is a great idea, and switching that often is A-okay. And it sounds like you weren't hurt when your vehicle was T-boned, which to me is the most important part. And I'm sorry they weren't there for you when this happened.
I also want to say, I will say the name of the new insurer that Ed is with, and it's Amica, which I do have, and they are a mutual insurance company. So if you end up getting a dividend at the end of the year, that may offset some of that extra cost.
Did you get a dividend this past year?
I don't remember. I think I got something. I have all my insurance with them, so I get like a discount for multi and all that stuff. Dave in Michigan says, a census announced a definitive agreement to acquire Vanguard's individual 401k, multiple participant SEP, and simple IRA plans business. What are Clark's thoughts? We had so many questions about this.
Man.
And so we wrote an article on it right away at Clark.com, but I thought I should just put one on the air. So
I had no idea how many people think I'm the man from Vanguard. Because I've had people come up to me all exercise like, your Vanguard did this to me. Well, Census is a respected company in the employee benefit space. They actually manage our 401k for our company, and our employees are all in Vanguard funds. Is this going to cost people money? Likely, over time, being with Census, which is a for-profit enterprise, versus Vanguard, which is a co-op, is likely to be more expensive for your plan. Vanguard is reorienting their company to be a completely different kind of operation than, let's say, Fidelity or Schwab. Vanguard just wants to be in the ETF and fund business, and then direct financial advice with their advisory services, which they're now running ads for all the time, where they were never an advertiser. But doing wider things like having cash management accounts, gone. Doing things like having their own credit card like Schwab and Fidelity have, not doing that. Being able to do all your banking with them, not their thing anymore. So getting rid of these retirement plans that they manage is part of the cultural shift at Vanguard to just be about funds. And they become the second largest fund house in the world, not fund house, but fund, F-U-N-D, house in the world. And this is their new direction. And I hope that the casting off of people to a census works out okay. But I have no way of knowing what kind of fees they're going to creep in, they're going to have creep in over time.
All right, and I'm really impressed by this person. Lucas in California says, I'm 38 years old. I spent much of my 20s and 30s being irresponsible on drugs. Thankfully, I am sober now.
Congratulations.
That's amazing. I've got a Roth IRA with Vanguard that a family friend set up for me back in 2013 with $1,000. I've since added to that, and I've gotten it up to over $6,000. It's in a thing called the Vanguard Star Fund with a 60-40 split of stocks and bonds. I've also recently opened a brokerage account through Vanguard to invest in the VTI index. My time horizon is long-term, 20 to 25 years. Can you explain the Star Fund and what you think of it? Often I get so depressed that I haven't begun this journey earlier and wonder if I'm just totally screwed. I've got $12,000 in my savings account and plan to max out my Roth for 2024. I work at a golf course seasonally and make about $22,000 a year. I'm living with my parents until I get back on my feet, so I don't have rent or many expenses.
So Lucas, you're beating yourself up, and you have been in a really dark place for a lot of your 20s and into your 30s, and you've turned that around. You should be proud of that you are now, is it okay to say with drugs, sober?
Yeah, he said sober, yeah, amen.
That you are on a new path. Do not at all say, what am I going to do? I'm so far behind. Truth is, historically, most people didn't start saving for the future till they hit their 40th birthday. There's something about 40 being the symbol of middle age, that's when people say, oh, well, I'm not a kid anymore, need to start saving. The fact that you've already got this base and that you've got this mindset building up for the future, great. Star Fund. Star Fund is a good conservative choice, not what I would recommend for you in your Roth. I would much rather see you in the target retirement fund, let's say for 38, so 30 years from now. Let's say the 2055 fund. And what Vanguard will do in that is they'll steadily make your investing more conservative as you get closer and closer to 2055. And right now, it'd be much more invested in stocks than the Star Fund is. Star Fund is a more conservative fund, not appropriate at 38 with your long time horizon. As for being in the total stock market index with Vanguard, that is one of my favorite funds that exists in an investment account, either their exchange traded fund version or their index fund, and you're in that. That is wonderful for tax treatment and expenses, and is great as a choice in an investment account. So be proud of what you've overcome and what you have in front of you now. And you've had great support from family and friends, and what a difference that makes in your life and going forward.
Maybe you've inspired somebody else by just asking the question too.
Absolutely, that when life feels dark, the light can shine again as it has in your life. Coming up ahead, something that, Christa, you've only heard me talk trash about since
so
you
long.
first met me in 1997. Covenants not to compete. I hate them, hate them, hate them, hate them.
How do you feel, Clark?
Hate them. And now we're getting closer to maybe covenants not to compete being killed off. And I'm going to tell you what I'm so fired up about straight ahead. Covenants not to compete are something that corporate America loves and I love to hate. It allows corporations to have you sign an agreement that makes you their prisoner, even if they lay you off, even if they fire you. No matter what happens, you are their prisoner. You are prohibited from working in your field of expertise, training, or education for can be a number of years depending on the state. Even when they cast you loose, you're still not allowed to go and earn a living. It hurts society by not having your productive capacity contribute to economic growth and prosperity in the country, and it crushes your ability to provide for yourself, or if you have a family, to provide for your family as well. Companies do it because they're cowards. Companies do it because if they treated workers right, you wouldn't have an incentive to go somewhere else. And there's a difference with somebody who has access to corporate secrets, somebody who's in the executive suite, or highest levels with access to sensitive data. Having a covenant for that tiny, tiny sliver of the workforce makes sense. But the federal government, through a move I don't support, through a federal agency most people don't know about, the Federal Trade Commission, by a divided vote of 3-2, voted to ban all covenants not to compete. The reality is, covenants should not exist, but it should be something that's passed through the legislative process. And then it has the full force of law. This is going to be tied up in the courts forever, even though there was a big flourish about this. And a lot of companies have been whining and going to their lawyers, trying to come up with ways around this. And U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that fears free enterprise, has come out against it, and they're going to sue about it. And I mean, this is just so funny because it also crushes your ability to use your skills to make more money. And my favorite example about how it hurts economic activity is Massachusetts. Massachusetts, if you're old enough, you remember this. Massachusetts used to dominate the technology industry, used to own the technology industry. And that's where all the breakthrough computer manufacturers were and software producers and all that. And Massachusetts lost that market power and market strength and the intellectual power because California banned covenants not to compete. And so people could work wherever. They could take their skills from this startup to that one, to the other one, to big tech company, to small tech company, to all kinds of innovators. And now California, in spite of all its craziness, is one of the world's largest economies by itself, is bigger economically than most any country in the world. And the workers are free to take their experience and skills wherever they want. And so that's a magnet for the brightest among us.
Can I ask you a question? So do you believe, though, in non-disclosure agreements, NDAs?
NDAs. So NDAs, within reason, are perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, because if you own a company and you come up with some brilliant idea.
Right. And so somebody should not be able to take it and take your corporate secret somewhere else. And that goes back to what I said, that if you have key knowledge about the inner workings of a company, because you're at the highest level where those decisions are being made, having a covenant for you makes perfect sense. NDAs, too broadly drawn, can be a substitute essentially for a covenant not to compete. But think how foolish this got. Remember Jimmy John's, the sandwich shop, had a covenant not to compete on its delivery drivers? Mm-hmm. Oh, they know big corporate secrets, right? And then hairdressers in most states can't take their skills to another hairdresser. They're under these ironclad covenants not to compete that make them a prisoner of whatever shop they start at. I mean, this is idiotic stuff. And so this conversation is the right direction. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that claims to speak for capitalism and free enterprise, actually is all about protectionism of its own corporate clients rather than being for the free market. Free market rules. Let me tell you, you want economic growth? You want people to be able to get better skills and fatter paychecks? Let them take their skills to whoever will pay them the most or treat them the best, or a combination of those two. That's what we should be about in America, not some big corporation squashing you like a bug.
Okay.
Of course, I have no opinions on this.
Nope.
And Clark Stinks is there for you. For those of you who hate the free market, you can go post there. No, that was rotten terrible of me.
All right.
I'm sure there are other perspectives on covenants not to compete other than they're rotten terrible.
Joey in Texas says, I'm in the job market looking for a full-time job in the financial sector. I've interviewed for a job for a private practice that does not provide health insurance. The practice pays more than the big firms, but I never have had to find my own insurance. They do offer a monthly stipend to assist with the cost, along with the higher market salary. Any thoughts on this kind of option? Finding my own insurance seems daunting.
So finding your own insurance used to be really hard to do. It's not now because of the idea of the exchange, where you can go to healthcare.gov and you can put in your particulars of your age, and it will show you plans where the coverages are identical from company to company. By having a transparent shopping exchange, you can see what's available to you where you're working in Texas. And if you're in one of the big four, Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, you'll have pretty wide choices. If you're in a less urbanized part of Texas, it gets much more difficult to find a good variety of healthcare plans. But in the big four, if you're in one of the big four, this will be pretty easy. And you will also have a choice, if you're really healthy or really unhealthy, either extreme, of going into an HSA eligible plan. And that is my favorite because it allows you to put money into a tax-free savings account. Or you can even invest the money in a variety of stock-type investments where the money can grow tax-free. You get a tax credit up front, it grows tax-free. You spend the HSA money tax-free eventually and spend it as late in your life as you can. An HSA eligible plan is simply one that has a high deductible built into it. And you'll see all that when you go to healthcare.gov.
Catherine in Virginia says, yikes, Clark, I wonder if I made a mistake. I had to have a heart monitor on me for 48 hours. I'm fine now. And when I arrived at the hospital, they gave me the cost estimate after running my insurance. They then asked if I wanted to prepay. If I paid then and there, I would pay $50 less than the estimate. I did this, but I wonder if it was the right choice. What do you think?
You made the right choice, Catherine, and those heart monitors are amazing. I had to wear one last fall, and they're just tracking your heart basically around the clock. They give you a companion Android phone that looks like it's from 1945. It's the most obsolete thing in the world. And all it does is report how your heart's doing and continual reports over cellular. And if you paid your deductible up front or your portion up front and they gave you a discount for doing so, you did just exactly the right thing.
Glenn in Florida says, I've always followed your guidance to use my credit cards at least twice per year to keep them in good standing. I have one card that I use at least once per month. I just received a letter from them indicating an account review being scheduled because of the highest balance on this card has been significantly lower than your credit limit on this card, and my credit limit could be decreased following the review. The letter indicated I could opt out of this review if I anticipate spending activity to change by calling an 800 number. I called the number on the back of my card, not the one they provided, and took about 40 minutes on the phone to verify the letter was legit. I called the 800 number provided and opted out of the review. I'm wondering why this card was flagged. My wife believes it's because I buy and then immediately pay for each item with bill pay, so when the statement arrives, it's always a zero balance. Our credit scores are consistently in the 830s. Any theories on why these 2 times per year guidance didn't work here?
Yeah, so my 2 times a year advice is not working right now with more and more issuers. Let me tell you what's going on. The number of people going delinquent and then having charged off balances on credit cards is rising right now. We've got, as I referred to it before, the barbell. We have people that are doing really well financially right now who are able to do what you're doing. You're paying balances in full. They're getting no interest from you. And then the other end are people who are running into trouble with credit cards, not able to even service the interest, and then are being charged off. Normally you have a bell curve where you got a middle that most people fall. Right now it's really hollowed out in the middle, and we have these 2 extremes. So the credit card issuers, many of the bigs, and your Capital One has a lot of people who tend to have cards who are new with credit or have had issues with credit in the past, or as they call it, credit challenged. And so they are really, really freaking out right now, and they're not the only one, about low use of available credit. Because there's a pattern that the credit card companies saw 17 years ago in the banking scandal era that led to the Great Recession, where people who had very low balances with high limits were losing their job or whatever, and suddenly they were charging all these cards up that they had never used a lot and defaulting on the debt. So they're really freaking out at Capital One and other issues that if you're using a very tiny percent of your credit, you're creating ultimate future risk for them. So they're saying, hey, you either increase your charge activity, doesn't matter you're paying the balance in full, but how much you use a card, or they're either going to send you a notice closing your account, or they're going to dramatically reduce your credit limit. So in the past, where I've said it doesn't matter how many cards you have, if you're a rewards chaser and you've got 26 different credit cards or whatever, most of which you're not using, you need to become more purposeful and intentional about how you use your credit cards, because if you don't use a lot of them at any major amount, you're going to see those notices come, or no notice, that the account is now closed, or that your limit is reduced by 90% or more from where your limit was before. So it is a clear change in the credit card market. I want you to know it, be aware of it, because it could come out of nowhere and reduce your credit score because you lose that available line of credit and you have one less active card. And know that your cards that you've forgotten about, you need to now remember them. And you were using this one once a month, but for very little, as I've recommended in the past, to keep it active and available in your credit mix. And right now, that may not be enough with any of a number of different issuers. A change in my advice and a change in the marketplace. And by the way, that's the way it always works with what we do here, is the advice we give is a moving target, because the way the marketplace operates never stops shifting. So things that have been classic rules may change. It's no different than during the height of COVID, when people looking for wheels, I was giving advice different than I normally ever do, that new cars were a better deal than 2 or 3 year old used cars. That's never happened at any time I could ever remember except during COVID. And so advice does change, and it can be just for a minute, or it can change a whole new direction that it goes in for a while. And this with the credit cards is an example.
And you're actually going to talk tomorrow about buying a used car.
I am going to talk about buying used cars because there's a lot going on you need to know. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Remember, we're about you, if I could spit the words out, you learning ways to save more, spend less, and avoid getting ripped off.